June 1958. Sheridan, Wyoming. The cattle trucks roll up Main Street past a little shop where a man of 68 sits at his bench, carving roses into leather almost nobody buys anymore. For 50 years his saddles carried the ranchers of this county every rose, every leaf, cut by one steady hand. Now the ranches order factory tack from a catalog, the shop's books are bleeding, and the finest saddle maker in the Bighorn country is about to close his doors for good. Out front, a tall man in a dusty hat stands looking through the window at the tooled leather. Nobody recognizes him yet. Here is the story. His name was Amos Kettering. Everyone in Sheridan County called him Amos. He was 68 years old in the summer of 1958, and men said he could carve a rose into saddle leather so fine you could almost smell it. Amos was born in 1890 in a homestead cabin out toward the Bighorns, the son of a Wyoming ranch hand who broke horses for the big cattle outfits. He grew up horseback in a country that lived by cattle and leather. But it was the leather that took him. At 14, he apprenticed in a Sheridan saddle shop, in the days when Sheridan was becoming famous across the West for one thing above all, its saddles. The Sheridan style, deep carved wild roses, flowing stems, leather worked until it bloomed. Amos learned it from the old masters, and by the 1920s, he was one of them. For 50 years, Kettering Saddlery on Grinnell Street made the rigs the ranchers swore by. A Kettering saddle fit horse and rider like it had grown there. Ranch families bought them for weddings and passed them down like land. His carved roses won ribbons at the county fair so many years running they finally just asked him to judge instead. Amos married Nell, a ranch cook's daughter, in 1915. They had one son, Dale. Nell died in 1949 thrown when her horse spooked on an icy creek crossing. The kind of death the ranch country knew too well, the kind that comes from the life itself. After that it was Amos and the shop. Dale had no feel for leather. He'd gone off to Denver to sell insurance, and Amos never held it against him. Though the silence in the shop got bigger every year, Amos had a particular thing about him. 50 years of driving a swivel knife through heavy leather had built the muscle of his right forearm up like a blacksmith's, while the left stayed an old man's arm, and when he rolled up his sleeves in summer, the mismatch made the ranch kids stare. He'd flex the big arm and tell them, "That's 50 years of roses, son." It was the truest thing about him. One arm made entirely of his life's work. The shop radio played Marty Robbins and Johnny Cash that summer, and the Purple People Eater, which Amos despised. Coffee at the Mint Bar's lunch counter was a dime. He drove a battered green 1946 Chevy pickup with a toolbox in the bed. But it was 1958. The big outfits were buying factory saddles, now stamped, not carved, half the price and a third the life. The catalog tack came in by rail, shiny and cheap. Orders that had run 40 saddles a year had fallen to 6. The young cowboys didn't know the difference anymore, or couldn't afford to care. And the last great rose carver in Sheridan sat at his bench with almost nothing left to carve. On the morning of June 12, 1958, at 10:00, the man from the First National Bank of Sheridan came to the shop, a loan officer named Merle Askew, in a summer suit, carrying a thin folder. He read from a type sheet. "Mr. Kettering, the note on the shop property is 90 days past due $340 in arrears. The bank has carried the account 18 months on goodwill. With receipts declining, we see no path to repayment. Unless the arrears are cleared by August 1st, the bank will call the note and the property goes to sale." He looked around at the workbench, the carving tools, the half-tooled saddle on its stand. "My advice? Sell the tools while somebody still wants them. Hand leather's a dead trade, Mr. Kettering. Folks buy from the catalog now. There were 2 ranchers in the shop, old Pete Lindqvist, waiting on a bridle repair, and a young hand with him. They heard every word. 50 years, Amos said quietly. There's saddles I made in this room carrying the third generation of the same family. And that's a fine thing. But the bank can't bank on sentiment. Askew closed the folder. August 1st. He set his card on the workbench, on top of a sheet of carving patterns, and left. Amos stood very still. Then he rolled his right sleeve down over the big forearm, slow and deliberate, like a man putting away his life's argument. He did not raise his voice. He did not beg. He picked up his swivel knife, turned back to the half-carved rose on the saddle skirt, and finished the petal he'd started. A man finishes the rose. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The tall man outside the window was John Wayne. He was 51 years old that summer, the biggest Western star alive, and he was in northern Wyoming for an ordinary reason. A picture was scouting the Bighorn country for locations, and Wayne had come up with a small advance party, staying quiet, seeing the land. He'd slipped away from the others that morning, just to walk a real cattle town's main street, the kind of street his whole career pretended to live on. He'd stopped at the window because of the roses, because John Wayne knew exactly what he was looking at. 30 years in the saddle will teach a man leather. Wayne had spent his whole working life horseback, and more than that, he'd been raised in the trade by the old ones, by Harry Carey, the first great cowboy of the pictures, who'd taught young Duke Morrison what was real and what was costume. And in those early years when Duke was a broke young actor doing cheap westerns, the picture people got their good rigs from real makers, and one of the rigs that came through the Carey circle, the saddle young Duke learned to sit like a cowboy instead of an actor, had a deep carved Sheridan rose on the skirt, and a maker's stamp that read A. Kettering, Sheridan, Wyo. He'd ridden that saddle for years. It had made him look like he belonged. Nobody had ever credited the man who carved it. Wayne stepped inside. The shop smelled of neat's foot oil and cut leather. He watched the old man finish a petal with a hand steady as a surgeon's, the right forearm thick as a fence post. He saw the bank man's card lying on the carving patterns. And from old Pete Lindvist, over by the bridles, he heard the rest the note. August 1st. The dead trade. And John Wayne, who owed half his cowboy soul to men like this one, went very still under the brim of his hat. He did not offer to pay the note. He knew better. A man with 50 years of roses in his arm does not take a movie star's pity. So Wayne did the thing only Wayne could do. He made 2 phone calls from the Sheridan Inn that evening. The first was to the head of the property department at the studio, because westerns were the biggest business in Hollywood in 1958, and the studios bought saddles, bridles, holsters, and tack by the hundred, most of it junk that fell apart under the lights. The second call was to the Wrangler bosses he'd worked with for 20 years, the men who outfitted every big western on the screen. The message was the same to both, plain as Wayne himself. The best leather man alive is sitting in Sheridan, Wyoming, with an empty order book. From here on, my pictures buy from Kettering. Tell the others. Then he walked back down Grinnell Street the next morning and did the one piece of business in person. He ordered a saddle full Sheridan rose, the finest rig Amos could build, at Amos's own price. He didn't haggle. When Amos, not recognizing the weathered face under the hat until the order slip was signed, finally read the name and looked up, Wayne just tapped the half-carved rose on the workbench and said, "I rode one of yours for 10 years, friend. Time I paid for it." The studio orders started arriving within the month first from Wayne's own production company. Then the others, the way it goes when the Duke says a thing. 16 saddles and 100 pieces of tack before Christmas. The banknote was cleared by July, $340 paid out of new orders. Not charity, and Merle Askew never came back down Grinnell Street. Have you ever had someone bring your life's work back to life? not with pity, but with honest orders at the very moment the world called your trade dead? That moment changes everything, doesn't it? John Wayne left Sheridan with the location party 2 days later. He never told the town what he'd set in motion. The orders came through the studios, and studio paper doesn't carry a star's name. He asked Amos for only one thing, that the saddle be shipped when it was ready. No rush. A rose takes what a rose takes. The last anyone in the shop saw of him, he was folding his tall frame into a car headed south down Main Street, one arm out the window, the Bighorn standing blue behind the town. Old Pete Lindvist asked Amos afterward if that had really been who he thought it was. Amos looked at the signed order slip a long moment. That, he said, was a man who knows leather. Kettering Saddlery did not go dark. The studio work carried the shop through the lean years, and the ribbon of it ran long because when Hollywood's westerns rode Kettering leather, the ranch country noticed, and the ranch orders came back too. Amos worked his bench for 14 more years, until he was 82. By his own order book, he built 211 saddles in those years, and every one carried the carved rose. And the trade did not die with him. The studio money let Amos do the thing he'd given up hoping for. He took on apprentices. 3 of them over the years, ranch kids with good hands. He taught them the Sheridan rose petal by petal, the way the old masters had taught him. One of them opened his own shop in Sheridan. The town that was supposed to lose its craft in 1958 is known for its saddle making to this day. His son Dale came home from Denver for the shop's 50th anniversary in 1963 and found his father famous again. The order book full, a photograph of a movie cowboy's saddle pinned over the bench. Dale's own son, Amos's grandson. Ray did have the feel for leather and spent summers in the shop learning the rose from the old man's hand. Amos Kettering died in 1974, at 84. Half the county came. They buried him with a swivel knife in his breast pocket, and the pallbearers were ranchers who had learned to ride on Kettering saddles. He told the story of the tall man exactly once a year, at the fair, and most folks took it for a saddle-maker's tall tale. He never pushed it. He just flexed the big right forearm and smile. The order slip, he kept. It hangs today in the Don King Museum in Sheridan, Wyoming, the town's great collection of Western saddlery and leather craft, and a corner given to the old-time makers. There, under glass beside one of Amos Kettering's rose-carved saddles, is a single yellowed order slip, dated June 13, 1958, in Amos's careful pencil, 1 stock saddle, full Sheridan rose, best rig. No rush, a rose takes what a rose takes. And on the customer line, in a big, plain, unmistakable hand, a signature that made the museum staff look twice when the family donated it. John Wayne. For years, that slip was the whole of the proof, and visitors assumed the Duke had simply once bought a saddle, the way famous men buy things. The rest of the story surfaced through the grandson, Ray Kettering, who had learned the rose at the old man's bench, grew up to take over the shop, and in the 1980s, sorting his grandfather's papers, he found the old studio order ledgers from late 1958. 16 saddles, 100 pieces of tack, order after order, arriving the same month a bank was about to call the note. He matched the dates. He remembered his grandfather's once-a-year fair story about the tall man who rode one of mine for 10 years. Ray told the museum, and the museum put the ledger page under glass beside the order slip, the tall tale. Proven true. 1 rose at a time. If this story reached you, do me a favor, pass it on. Share it with a veteran in your life. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. There are more Duke stories coming, and unfortunately they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.